Is it working? Okay, it is working. Okay, so there's a little bit of lag. So I'm sorry about that. I should have a checklist, but I only do these things very infrequently. I was just talking about how we are 2 months away from a very indecisively decisive moment in the nation of America, United States of America. There's this supposed election happening, but everybody's like stirring the pot to see how de-legitimized it is before it even happens. So there's a lot of things afoot. And I was just talking about how exhausting it is to just be talking about the same thing constantly. This whole presidential race really takes a lot of people on a ride and trips out. Everybody's like tripping out on it, and especially because this current president is really good on getting the media up in a tizzy, or else the media is just kind of programmed to get up in a tizzy by what he's doing, whatever the case that might be that he is doing. So yeah, this is just a live stream, and I will be talking into the microphone. I might read a chapter from the last book of the Alias to Dream series, and this is about the undeath of the author. I'm going to try to put that picture up there without it being too glossy, but yeah, that's the poet, or the author dies at the end of the story, but he doesn't actually die. He has to become undead and then edit the entire body, the corpus of work titled The Alias to Dream Saga. So I might read a chapter about that because, I haven't picked it up or read it, and I published it. Well, I wrote it in first in 2008, and then I rewrote it in the year of the siege engine. I had coded all of my years according to the Chinese calendar and like making a wordplay on the different beasts in the Chinese calendar. So I can't remember what the siege engine was, but I think it would had to have been the winter of 2015 is when I composed this. So yeah, I'll probably read a chapter of this, sing some of my evergreen musical. I have some more of that. I think it's coming along. I'm kind of stuck. I'm trying to do a very sincere song. And all I have is the very first two bars of it. And it's not catching me. I don't know where to go with it. So I'm looking for a little bit more inspiration. But most of the songs are kind of jazzy and mocking. But then all of a sudden, in the middle of all the chaos and the hubbub and the electric boogaloo of race war absurdity on the scale of a small liberal arts college in Olympia, Washington, there's like these moments of actual expression of why people aren't getting what they want and what they really want. And there's this one girl that stands up in the midst of the protests, and she starts singing. Just a subnote in the I can't remember. There's a technical term for the script of a musical. I think it's a technical term, but anyways, in the script, everybody's assigned the color and a body, right? So like it's black body number 5, because they're all just bodies. Like nobody has an actual personality except for key players. Brett Weinstein has an actual name. I haven't written his songs. His songs are gonna be really fun because he's gonna be like the bad guy in the whole situation, like foiling everybody's plans with his empirical science and white forms of knowledge. But in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of the struggle session, this one girl, she stands up, and it's like black body number 32. She stands up and she says, "I'm not oppressed." And then she sings, "I just want an education. I don't need your reparations." And that's all I have. So every morning I wake up with that tune, but that's all I have. I just want an education. I don't need your reparations. Right. So maybe later on in the live stream, I'll sing a couple of the jazzy tunes. I have White Silence is one, and Race War is probably the best one so far, but it's only partially written. I have Community Love, but I can't really actually figure out how to actually sing it. I have all the tunes, but I need to arrange it somehow. And then, of course, the Supremacist with the Bow Tie song, and oh man, White Silence is good too. But so I'm just gonna do some artistic verbal montaging with my mouth into your ears on this live stream. If you guys want me to chat with the chat, I'll do that too. It'd be nice to steer clear of politics stuff, but maybe there's some sort of politicking things that we can start talking about, I guess, if that's what people want to talk about. So if you guys have a question that you think that I should be rambling about, just go ahead and put it into the comment field and I'll look over there. Today's beer is Semidorato. It is a Sicilian taste lager beer, Birra di Puro Malto Premium. I wonder if all of that was a dog whistle for fascism. That's all I really know about Italian politics, is that fascism is something that they once tried on a long time ago and then put down. But now everybody in American discourse is talking about fascism constantly. And today, earlier, I tried to figure out what people were actually saying when they say that America is turning into a fascist state. I just want to know what they're actually meaning, because they've been saying that for 4 years and it just sounds so disconnected from an actual like thorough critique of how that's actually happening. It's usually just this rhetorical refrain about the sky falling, or the masses are marching, and then it's always interesting because the people who harp about the fascist America the most seem to have all this authoritarianism in their pockets to fix it. So I don't know. I'm very naive. I try to really lean into my ignorance, which is actually quite vast. That's why I end up doing so many interviews, because I'm really not a knowledgeable person. So there's just questions that I have and I fish around. And fascism was something I was thinking about today. And that's why I made a joke about Italian fascism. Though I'm sure this is not a fascist dog whistle. It's actually pretty nice. It is a lager. Let's taste it again. Rather hoppy, a little bit of that Belgium, kind of like that moldy sock kind of thing going in there. So it's pretty tasty beer. Pretty light too. Oh, Ben Weiser 22 asks if I like sports. Let's move that over there. I'll watch like football, American football playoffs. I'll watch whenever the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers play together, because I think the 49ers are basically the closest incarnation of pure evil that we will ever see in the universe. And I really invest a lot into that struggle. It's like it's a spiritual battle for me, watching the Seahawks and the 49ers duke it out. Of course, I don't want evil to win, so I get really invested in that. But it doesn't always work out in my favor. Like all of us, we all have to understand the evil triumphs sometimes. And you kind of have to just deal with that fact. And if you ignore that fact, then you will be constantly crushed when it does win. So you need to look at it, really study it, and really internalize that sense of defeat. Come back better, come back stronger, clear head, ready to pummel the crap out of the incarnation of evil, as it's embodied in the San Francisco 49ers. That's what I have to say about sports. Thanks for the super chat, and Spence. Sign asks about the flavor of a moldy sock. So there's these Belgian ales or lagers or whatever. Again, super ignorant here. Don't know why people listen to me, other than the sound that I try to make it pleasant, whatever know-nothings I'm spouting into your ears. But there is a Belgian kind of beer that has this really nice moldy kind of flavor, like this dusty, sweet, sockish flavor, like it's like some sort of sock, but it's not all the bad part of the sock. It's like something kind of pleasant, but yet at the same time a little turned, like it's a little funky. So that's what I mean by moldy sock flavor in particular European beers. Paul Nyack? Paul asks, Ben, have you ever traveled to other countries? I have been to Mexico in my teenage years, and I also went to Seattle when I was a Californian, and that felt like very much another country. This was before Seattle became what it is now. It was an adventure, and we really noted, all my Californian brethren and I, that Seattle women aren't that attractive compared to California women. And we had this ongoing joke with the assistant youth pastor, if you can believe that. We had an assistant youth pastor. Me and him had like this epic struggle going on for my girlfriends that he wanted to be dating. So we had a lot of tension going on there because I'd grown up with these girls, and he was like this beautiful young man who was older than me, and he wanted to mac on the the very lovely best friends of mine. Anyway, so he was from Seattle, so we'd go up there and we constantly like ragged on the beautifulness of Seattle women coming from California. So California has a particular aesthetic for the teenage conception of what it is to be a beautiful woman, right? And then this is a long time ago. I'm no longer thinking this way anymore. Actually, I prefer Northwest beauty to California beauty at this point in time. I find it's more textual. There's more things to adore about it. California beauty kind of achieved an ideal, and then it's kind of bland in its idealism. Anyway, so we kept on like mocking the fact that there wasn't a lot of beautiful women in Seattle, and the assistant youth pastor finally like found this beautiful woman, and he's like, "Look, the beautiful woman right there. You can't deny it." And then she walks into a car with California plates. It was just this beautiful experience. We really laughed at him at that point in time. I don't know if you guys were ever a teenager in a youth group, or specifically a male teenager in a youth group. It's a particular sort of experience, and I've spoken about that before. There's these different rituals involving a lot of bodily fluids and gases, and jocularity and mockery, and then the repeating of certain phrases over and over and over again. That's kind of what you do as a teenager in a youth group. And plus, while you're singing the praise songs, everybody tries to outdo each other by live crewing the praise song, right? By like rhyming it in different ways. That's where you can see a lot of the work in my Twitter output actually comes from this tradition of mocking different sorts of Bible verses and stuff like that, and twisting them around to milk juicy kind of chuckles in the back of a singing session. You know, I did have a very strong pious spiritual side of me, but I also had a very not so pious, not very spiritual side to me, and I expressed that a lot in the youth group with the other guys. You know, like that's how we kind of formed together. So we went to Mexico, we went to Seattle. I ended up going to Bible college in Canada. This is responding to the question by Paul about my international travels. I spent about 8 months in this place called Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, and I think it's pretty far north. It felt very far north. I was from California. This is like basically wasteland, and just tundra everywhere. And I started smoking and drinking, but we weren't allowed to dance. Well, we weren't allowed to drink or smoke, but we did that anyways. But it was really hard to dance because you would have to actually organize the dance, and we weren't allowed to do that. But you don't have to organize smoking and drinking. You just kind of went off campus and did that. So that's where I started drinking and smoking. But I couldn't dance there. Probably still have scars about that. But I did get to experience a lot of Northern Lights. And again, like I had like these very strong, powerful spiritual experiences that were mixed in with a lot of broody, 9-inch nails fueled nihilism that I was playing around with, probably pretty hormonal too, in a specific way that I want to get into now, but it has to do with reproduction and being a 19-year-old. I don't know if you've ever been a 19-year-old who is keen on biologically entering into the act of Congress, but I was. It was a pretty intense experience for me. But your mileage may vary on that. Again, that was a long time ago. Things have changed, right? And that's just kind of nature at work. So I went up to Canada for Bible college, and then I've been in Europe several times. I went to Austria, and I spent probably about 3 months in France, and I went to a monastery. Again, I don't know, I'm talking about religion. There's a theme here. I went to a monastery when I was in my second evergreen program called Dark Romantics. I ended up at a monastery. I kind of went on this pilgrimage, right? And I ended up at a monastery, and that was very, 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 very wonderful. Very wonderful. I'm not a Catholic. If I'd be anything, I would be a Catholic, but I'm kind of lazy and there's no Catholic church around here. And anyways, I would like a Latin Mass. Definitely have to be a Latin Mass. I don't want to have any English involved in my worship, right? Unless I'm, laughing or I'm making something sightly in the eyes of the Almighty God. Like, I don't want to have this monastery. He'd been there for 20 years. So he'd take me on these walks and we'd walk around and I'd ask him questions about, Catholicism and specifically around the Holy Virgin Mary. That's a very central aspect of Catholicism that was absolutely absent in my kind of middle of the road evangelical Christian upbringing, right? Like there was no like central figure of the female in that conception of the Christian religion. And so that was something that I was, had a lot of questions about and wanted to be, kind of better versed in. I really think that masculinity and femininity, we don't really understand them. I think that they're very possible, very rich territory to really explore expressions of the human spirit. I think that a lot of people, whenever I speak about gender in a positive way, they think I'm being prescriptive, and I'm not. I think it's a very powerful descriptive tool. People don't want to have it prescriptive, and I don't think you need to have that prescriptive, by which I mean gender expectations. You could get rid of them tomorrow. I don't care. But I think that the reality of describing the world in terms of gender is inexhaustible, quite nearly inexhaustible, and it actually has a lot of salience for the dramatic kind of behaviors of human beings. There's a couple of other questions here, paid for by Super Chat, for which I appreciate. I should thank everybody for supporting this channel. Thank you guys for supporting me on my channel through all the various different ways. Very appreciative of that. Andrew Joyner speaks in British pounds. From Andrew Joyner: Sup, Benji? Watched you from the beginning. Oh, cool. Someone from the Badger Pundit channel recommended you. Keep up the good work. Thanks. Badger Pundit. I have not heard that name. That is a name I have not heard in a long time. Really ignorant here. I'm messing up Star Wars quotes. That's how ignorant I am. Maggie Ellis. Love her. She's been around forever. Let's see what she has to say. Benjamin. Hello. It's mine and my husband's birthday. Wow. That's amazing. Are you guys twins? Thank you for your empathy about my resentment from having grown up in around Portland. Oh, Portland is a failed state. It's not really failed. Talk about Portland. Portland changed. I moved to Portland in 2000, and it was kind of at this particular point in history. It was really chill. It was really funky. It was not really that produced, right? It was kind of, it felt to me like it was kind of just this slow, kind of out of the way, medium to large city, right? And over the next 10 years, it dramatically changed. And then after 2010, I'd go and I visited. I moved up to Olympia to, dive into pure reclusivism, which is just my jam, guys. Just reclusion is just the best. Out in the woods, don't worry about anything. Watch the world burn from afar, maybe like scatter some droppings about it with your reflective insights, if you have some, being a recluse. But I would go back to Portland, and it was filled with more and more people that were kind of from Portland, like people that it just started becoming more and more Portland in this other kind of like produced kind of Portland. And then it just I kind of lost my connection with it, though. A lot of creativity, a lot of like really brilliant food cook people, and just the slumming around and retiring when you're 24 thing that I did when I was there. That was kind of like that kind of era, just being a poet in Portland, like working with preschoolers and writing poetry in Portland. I did that for a long time. And then it kind of changed. And now it's kind of like the site for all of this, this culture clash that they've been really playing with. They've been playing with it and playing with it and playing with it. And I really do think most of it is LARPing. I really don't see very clear, explicit demands over the last 4 years with regards to what Antifa is trying to want and what the anti-Antifa are trying to want. Like, I don't really understand what they're doing. They're just playing this game, right? And they have their slogans and they have their demands and stuff, but it's nothing really particular. It's like, well, what are you doing? And then they just keep on doing that every year, and finally you get to 2020, and now like it's just part of the culture now. Like, revolution is just part of the culture. And that freaking mayor, Ted Wheeler, I don't want to get too far into this, But the mayor, Ted Wheeler, total George Bridges kind of guy. Democrat loyalist, right? Part of the bureaucracy, part of that whole chain of command and that whole power structure. He has bosses upside of him and downside of him, right? He's got like his Democratic base, his very progressive Democratic, very kind-hearted, very crunchy granola, very tech infused, kind of weird neoliberal progressive base, right? So he's got to serve those people. And then he's got the people higher up in the Democratic chain, right? So he ignores the violence, he ignores the violence, he ignores the violence, he makes excuses for the violence, right? He even attends the protest. He gets tear gassed because the police themselves say, if you are still on the street, this is a riot, get out the street. He stays with the protesters to do that little stupid thing where they don't really are actually doing anything productive. Nothing productive is going on. Ergo, I don't really understand what's going on because there's nothing productive about it. It's just kind of madness and playing at madness. Anyway, so the stupid kids came over and they like performed their, siege outside of his apartment building and flashed lights and had a rock concert. And then they apparently lit his foyer on fire. And while they're doing this, Donald Trump is like, I'll help you, I'll help you, I'll help you, I'll help you. And he's like, this is all Donald Trump's fault. We don't need your help. Leave us alone, Donald Trump. You're the reason why this is happening. It's like, no, it's not. You can't say that that's why it's happening. It's a civil war within the left. It has very little to do with Donald Trump other than that Donald Trump is allowing them and excusing them and giving them an excuse to act that way. But it's them. It's all them. They cannot own it. His foyer gets lit on fire. And then, get this, he moves. Like, he just moves. He blames it all on Trump, and he, like, sets up shop across town or something. It's, like, so idiotic. It's so idiotic. And you're like, what actually makes sense of this? And I look at what happened at Evergreen, and you have George Bridges, and I'm actually kind of starting to understand George Bridges as somebody who has a boss higher than them, as somebody who's a part of a chain of command. And all of his decisions are based on mitigating damage to the party, right? He's a party loyalist. Kate Brown too, or is it Kate Brown, the governor of Portland? Like they say, it's all Trump's fault. This is all Trump's fault. And they don't start saying that until somebody gets shot that's from a Trump supporter, right? A Trump supporter gets shot and then they recognize the violence. It's just, it's mind boggling. And the only way that it makes sense is that they are following a plan. They are protecting their vested interests in the party, right? And they're protecting their base from realizing that not everything is Trump's fault. They're protecting themselves by saying, well, it is Trump's fault. And then they're protecting the Democratic establishment higher up, because if it is their fault, they will be slaughtered in the election. If the word gets out and the story is set out there that the Democrats are responsible for the riots, right? That the riots were a part of this weird shifting war within the Democratic Party, where you have a lot of radicals that have been promised like free education, free medical care, all this free crap by the ultra progressives, and they are constantly being, all that free crap is constantly being snatched away by the neoliberals, by the corporatists, right? But it's all a part of this weird kind of democratic mix. And I know that there's nuances in there that I'm skipping over, and that there are plenty of good liberal people out there, or solid Democrats out there, probably even somebody who's pretty sympathetic, maybe even somebody sympathetic to Antifa on my, listening to me, who disagrees with me. I know it's much more complex than I'm giving it actual credit for, but if you look at the behavior of the mayor and the governor of Oregon, and it really reminds me of the way that nothing made sense about George Bridges, because he was always lying, he was always changing his tune. So he doesn't care about the truth, he cares about preserving some sort of order, right? He's manipulating everybody in order to preserve a certain order or to forward a certain end, being a certain sort of order. And so I think that, Wheeler doesn't have any balls. Like he's getting protested and threatened by the people that he's protecting. And he's pretending that he's protecting them from Donald Trump, when he's trying to protect them from themselves. It's insane. I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just insane. It's just insane. It's just insane. There's something that happened in the Pacific Northwest where we lost our sense of authority. We got really complacent in our creativity. And I'm talking about somebody who's lived here for a long time. Like, this is basically kind of my inherited home, right? This is where I landed in my life, in my adult life. Like, and I was part of this. Very, very liberal, very Democrat, very progressive. In certain ways, I'm kind of oddly, like, kind of culturally conservative in certain ways, but very, like, looking on the good side of life, trying to produce good art, produce, the excellence of taste and stuff like that. But eventually something happened where that curdled, where we thought that we had it made and we knew what was going on. We were really lucky to be living in this part of the world, and we got soft, right? And then the temperature ramped up, and then we didn't have any sort of moral authority anymore. We were too soft. There's no leadership out here. There's no leadership. If you look at the mayor of Olympia and of Seattle and of Washington and of Oregon and of Portland, maybe I'm not doing right by these people, but it seems like they have a really difficult time understanding where to draw a line. If I recall correctly, the governor of Oregon said that, we need to stop the crime. We need to, like, have more troops on the ground, right? The more, like, local sheriff's department. And 2 sheriff's departments said, we're not going to help you because you're not prosecuting anybody. It doesn't matter if we go around and we scoop people up because you're going to release them the next day, right? And it's just exactly what happened at Evergreen. The leader, like the nominal leader, George Bridges, took any sort of power away from the police department to do anything about what was going on, completely hobbled them, made them weak in the eyes of everyone, right? Well, they still had the responsibility if something went wrong, right? So they had all the responsibility, but none of the authority. And he himself abdicates the authority because he's playing this long game to get all these adjutants to do just enough damage to the system that he can recreate it in his image. A little fired up about this. I didn't want to talk about politics. And I'm probably wrong. I should just start doing the musical. There's a couple more super chats. Andrew says, Ted Wheeler is a prike. It's late here. I'm off to bed. See you, dude. Have a good night. Mr. James in Bullington says, speaking of Portland, fan of Jim Goad's writing. I don't know Jim Goad. Sorry to say that. And then Point Curation curses me with the desire of me to run for office. Gosh. Might have to do that someday. All right. Okay, we'll see. I'm gonna do the white silence one. You guys want the race war one or the white silence one? The race war one's kind of iffy. I mean, this is kind of edgy stuff, right? Where is white silence? I think I have it memorized. I don't need to read it, but I think I'll... Oh, here we go. Okay, you guys ready? White silence. White silence. Whisper quiet, rule compliant acts of violence. White silence. Gaslighting you like methane. Asphyxiating, causing pain. Like paper cuts that drive you nuts, and every time you make a fuss, will passively, aggressively, oppressively, progressively condescend and making amends by saying we have black friends with thicker skin. White silence, whisper quiet, rule compliant acts of violence. We aggress so microly that even if you're literally shaking like a fallen leaf, it's not our fault, for we believe that sticks and stones are what break bones, will gentrify your family homes, will touch your hair, and will compare you to our standards thin and fair. Your grammar we will curtly tisk until you are forced to code switch. And every time that you're around, we'll comment on your shade of brown. You'll be the brunt of our bad jokes, and then we'll ask, could you explain black folk? These tiny tortures we dole out, they're great at making you all doubt. If you belong in seriously, you never will our histories. Something going on into racial essentialism there. Sorry about that performance. I kind of messed up, but white silence, white silence. So I'm thinking like there's gonna, for that scene, this is part of the Evergreen musical. So there's gonna be two black bodies, and I'm sorry, this is the language. I don't mean to be dehumanizing. This is literally the language taken from Evergreen and progressivism, right? This is not the way that I view things. It's not. It's the way that the people who are fighting against racism view the world. So there's these two black bodies. I don't know the lead up to the song, but then all the white bodies come in and swarm around and start speaking about white silence. And they're like, white silence, white silence. And there's this part where they start like, you know, microaggressing on the black bodies around them. And then the black bodies like erupt in this breakdown rap battle against white supremacy. I think that's how I see it. Oh, okay. All right, I'm gonna probably mess up this. I'm good at like performing when I'm not being watched, but like I kind of slip up. So this is the Race War song, and again, this is a pastiche of something that I find very toxic. I don't believe this stuff, but this is what these progressive people believe, and it's like literally what they believe. Okay, I'm sorry, not all progressive people, but certain strains of this movement. How does it go? It's a race war, a race war. We're gonna watch the bodies of the privileged hit the floor. In a race war, a race war. We're divvying identity and giving it a score. Negative for the whites who thought that civil rights would lead to a world where they didn't have to fight for all the things that they stole from the people and the soil, from the culture to the gold. But the time is drawing close. Yes, their time is drawing closed. And we're coming out in droves, demanding what is owed. Or else a race war, a race war. We want to watch the bodies of the privileged hit the floor. In the race war, a race war. We're divvying identity and giving it a score. Anyways. That's the stuff I do to take my mind off things. I don't know why I'm doing that. It's just coming to me though. So, you know, Evergreen the musical, maybe someday it'll be all put together. I have to like draft up the script. I think that there is like a libretto. Is that what it's called? The script to a musical or an opera? Is it a libretto? I don't know. Oh, wait, now I'm too loud? Okay. All right. Now I feel like weird because I like unspooled my innards with singing. I like to like keep my songs and my craft like hidden away in the closet. Like I lose all grounding. It's really weird sensation. Losing all grounding, like when I sing, like going into that performance space, I don't have any training in it. And it just feels very exposed, you know? I like exposing other things, you know? Not myself, right? Fallacies. There's a wordplay in there, but it doesn't quite work in the open air. Oh no. That's a really good idea. So Clutch McDougal says, will there be a Felix Brathwaite cringe rap that barely rhymes? You know what? Have you guys read that Kendi book? That Kendi, How to Teach Your Baby to Be Anti-Racist? It's so bad. Like the writing itself. Like the ideas behind it are incredibly racist. Incredibly racist. Like everybody's just a race. And you should see that constantly, everywhere. Everybody has a race. Okay, I don't agree with that. I think we can go beyond that. But there's no rhyme. I mean, there is rhymes, but they're like weird and there's no rhythm. It's weird. It's really weird how this guy can be such a bad writer and yet like so powerful. Insofar as he is powerful. I think his time will come and go pretty quickly because he just doesn't have what it takes necessarily on an intellectual level to like go up to bat for a sustained period of time. There's a lot of holes to poke in that. He needs to be completely surrounded by a bunch of people who agree with him and who want to use him to their ends, which would be the enforcement of a incredible amount of crazy racist doctrine that calls itself the opposite of racist. All right. Which I would think is not that far from certain strains within the Democratic establishment that want to kind of implement that across the board, because it really squelches the ability for people to disagree with them, right? It's very good for corporations to enforce this stuff because it comes packaged with all these speech codes and then all this liability insurance. Well, we told them not to say that. We put them all this training, right? And then colleges themselves are like, there was a story on the Twitter where this girl argued for biological sex being a reality in a Zoom classroom, and she was reported to the Office of Equity, and now she has to go to like this equity training because she was arguing for like that sex is real. So like the whole apparatus is being installed in all these institutions. And the only reason that somebody like Kendi can get ahead is because he is speaking to that thing. He's surrounded. He's completely sectioned off within a bunch of people who only agree with him. Same with Robin DiAngelo. There's not a single video of her actually engaging in debate. The ideas are undefensible, right? To actually argue the ideas, they fall apart under scrutiny. They absolutely fall apart under scrutiny. So how they've manifested is they're completely enwrapped in layers upon layers of agreement and bureaucracy. Anyway, so that would fold really well into a Felix Brathith rap. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's a character in the Complete Evergreen Story. Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay. So how you guys been liking the interview circuit? I really liked the guy that I had on, Casey Peterson. I think I published him on Monday. No, I think it was Tuesday. He was ready to interview the next day when I finally contacted him. He was like, oh, let's do it. So I think it was on Tuesday. I really enjoyed that. Very smart, put together guy. I think he's rather young, rather naive with regards to understanding just how entrenched this stuff is and how far it's backed up by the powers that be. But he's really taking this stuff seriously and really trying to root it out of our defense and our nuclear systems. Can you imagine that? It's already in the FBI. Can you imagine that? When all this stuff just goes live, it's already creeping in. And then the George Floyd this summer, it had the mandate to really advance really quickly. And once this stuff actually becomes part and parcel of our livelihoods, of all professional instances and all government business, we are truly in a completely new world. We will be in another era. We will be in just another Spanish Inquisition. We will be in another like kind of Cold War, and it will be a cultural war between people who can pick apart ideas and don't think in these terms of, of privilege and of victimhood and of protecting everybody by means of redistributing resources and opportunities along identity lines. And any sort of criticism of that stuff will be pushed out into the speakeasies, right? We're entering in the 1920s of the 2020s, where it's just like this prohibition on discourse in the public sphere, because this ideology cannot stand criticism. It cannot stand, and has all these apparatus in place to retrain you, to resculpt you, to get you fired, to motivate you not to speak up about it. And so Casey is an excellent example of somebody who has his stuff together. And he did the reading, he did the research, and he's just going after it. Balls to the wall. We need more people, balls to the wall, going after this stuff. And I know it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable because there's a lot of tension in the air. There's a lot of narratives afloat, with like our country descending into this supposed fascism, right? To stand up against anti-fascism is to put yourself on the side of fascists. To stand up against the anti-racist, you're on the side of the racist, right? It's very tricky. and it has a lot of power. And I'm saying that, I know we all know that, but I'm just saying that with the energy that I'm saying that to encourage people in whatever small way you can to ask the questions that unravel this stuff, to stand up where you can stand up, and to really seriously put this stuff out of business and out of our government. It's basically a religion. If we can classify it as a religion, we can say this doesn't belong in government. If we can classify it as politics, we can get it out of business, right? There are acts and precedents about it, but it just thinks so highly of itself, and it has the cultural mandate right now. We're really looking at a really interesting time coming up. Oh yeah, and then King Crocoduck, very smart guy, very super smart guy. He proposed that he interview me, and like I'm like, I don't think that that's the right thing. Let me let me ask you the things, because this guy, another guy, put together, very smart, very very smart, and I think we got I asked him some questions about like the political sphere and making a decision on who to vote for and which administration would be better to go against this stuff that is very destructive, very anti-science, incredibly anti-science, right? And not even only anti-science, it's anti-efficiency. It actually literally throws a wrench into works. It degrades people's self-confidence, and it degrades people's interconnectivity. It totally does. It's total poison. And I think, I don't know what happened. I did an episode yesterday where I read a Twitter thread, and I gave I put it out there, like the disclaimer that this is from an anonymous account. It might be made up. I expected that there would be some criticism, that it would sound like fan fiction, and there's a lot of questions about that narrative, but the narrative was about a family or a relationship between an interracial relationship that had been cast into that anti-racist struggle. And I think it shed light on the possibility of this mindset, of this ideology actually infecting interpersonal relationships, because I've seen that happen. I've seen it happen a lot of ways. So even if that instance was a case of fan fiction, I still wanted to produce that. I could have probably made more disclaimers about it, like really don't get swept up into the reality of this thing, but the plausibility of this thing in explicating how this ideology really separates people from an authentic exchange of individual self and love and all the good things in life. In order to defeat fairness, they destroy everything else. In order to defeat injustice, what they call injustice or unfairness, right? They end up laying waste to everything else, because nothing can get in the way of fixing history, of arriving at that utopia. So you make life a living hell. This stuff is seriously damaging on so many different levels. And I know that I'm a broken record by speaking about it over and over again, but I think it's really just something that I have to keep on bringing up and really investigating it and putting out more and more subsidiary readings and more and more tools and just spending time looking at it, and then allowing people to look at me spending time on it, because you guys are generating just as much, if not better ideas than I am, right? So I think it's kind of a group effort. I know it's not that entertaining, but it's kind of just what's on my plate, right? It's the mission. It makes this stuff silly. Being an artist, imagine that. Imagine trying to just be an artist. Like, I just want to be creative, right? I just want to go walk around, pet a fox, sing on a rock, maybe watch a divine female form, descend from the heavenly clouds and gift me some sort of cryptic flower and then disappear, that's the life. Who doesn't want to just do that? But you can't do that, right? You can only retire so often in life, and I already did that, so we're in the thick of things. Chloe Malvu writes about the Twitter thread that I read yesterday. It doesn't sound like fiction, the Twitter thread, because there is a type of affluent black guilt that they aren't truly black if they haven't had the struggle. I saw it plainly with Naima. And actually, Coleman Hughes, my interview with Coleman Hughes, he's like basically the paragon of this conversation. The world is so much better off for him being around. Coleman Hughes, if you look up my interview with him, Coleman Hughes, he talks about that, about the pressures within, the kind of like the narrative and the mythic pressures within the Black American story, that cause these different kind of outcomes, or these kind of different psychological complexes and neuroses, because there's this narrative that's constantly pushed on us, that is based and rooted in fact, but it's constantly resurrecting what Thomas Chatterton Williams calls the wound, which is fascinating. And I try to be respectful with that. I try to be respectful with that because, my identity, right, it completely disallows me from actually understanding it on a first person basis, right? But I, insofar as when I do critique that, I'm trying to critique the ways in which that narrative is getting out of control, right? And try to respect the truth of that and the sacredness of that, that heritage, that very real heritage, but still see how that heritage is being used by these other political movements in order to forward something that nominally sounds like a good idea, but actually doesn't sound like a good idea at all once you look underneath the surface. Ninja Kid throws some sexy woman things into the chat. We have a dress, a bikini, some sort of pink bottle of goop, and a purse. Anyways, what else do I talk about? I looked at the chat and I saw something and I interpreted it in my head as criticism, and I've been off since I saw that. Really bad. That's why I don't debate things. Like, I completely lose my ground when I see criticism. I'm like, okay, well, now I have to stop everything and dissect everything I said up to that point to see what I did wrong, because now I'm arguing with the voice in my head when I probably just misinterpreted something. Weird. Talk about complexes. I don't know. I haven't read this one in a long, long time. I don't think it makes much sense. The author is just breaking apart. He's finally succumbing to his fantasy of being in more than one place at a time. Okay. Chapter 4, Negotiation. Then in spring, Ruby returned for a visit that became a permanent residence with friends I had been neglecting, and so have neglected to mention. We met up for breakfast, and then at my apartment, I got her lying on the floor, and the passivity in her muscles broke a thing that was like a scab in me. And a pestilence began flowing out my mouth, a tirade poured over her, or against the neglect I had inherited in her wake. He's talking about his ex-girlfriend. She sat there and said she was sorry, but there was only kindness in her voice and nothing that could help me find out why she had been able to move on while I had not. To understand why it was over, both for her and for reals, but not inside me. What was it I had placed in her? What precious stone had I cast that could not be gotten back, for I'd inscribed it with her once upon to me face. For I'd inscribed it with her once open to me face, now closed. She sat on a curb looking flummoxed as I raged. We had been walking her to a bus, and the sunlight was bright. I remember the gravel next to her sandals. I did not love her other than brother sisterly, but still she had robbed me of what I invested, and then her bus came and we parted with a terminal silence this time. I tromped inflamed to the Donut Hoe 2.0. The Donut Hoe in this story is this kind of pastry porn shop where there's like pastries in the front and then there's porn in the back, right? And this is like in the beginning of the internet era, so it's kind of this relic. It's perfectly a Portland thing. It's like something that you would find literally on the streets of Portland, right? Like the crazy donut place and like one of those porn shops, right? So that's it's called the Donut Hoe. I tromped and flamed to the Donut Hoe 2.0 and spent the hours torturing myself with images of depravity and assault, and stroking and striking and contortions of the human form into servile inanities. Legs spread and knees held up, smiles all around, my pejorative conscience smothered in oily, glutinous blobs and aromatic brown fluids and slathered in ointments, slick, greasy, smooth, until I lost my lock on that preservative leaven of ego or time-space or whatever. There beheld me my dark lady, interposed on my porn-mongering, and I surrendered to her, full knowing her deathly passage. My light force gathered up and shot into the blackness of her core. The taste of her abysme was proud disownership, was starlight falling, and all the while she was laughing at me, sing-songing. Your letting go brings me back beyond me, ha ha ha. You may taste my emptiness, but I will have you kept a man who tastes me as I taste men through him. Come and cease your letting go, dear Thomas. We have many others to with our bound embrace usurp. So what happens is he finds the image of beauty, the inverted image of beauty that we've been exploring through the entire series. There's these different archetypes that pop up through every story over and over and over again. And in this book, the end, everything's inverted. So instead of being this hallowed kind of image of the beautiful that is beyond the artist, that he's always kind of sculpting everything in the image of, you know, like his, like, she who he serves, she turns into death. She turns into the death of men in this time, and she allows him, and she manipulates him into basically feeding her the life of men. Like the discovery of art, like how after watching Kieslowski's Blue at 19, you went out to the diner to discuss it, and sitting in the Orang booth with cigarettes and watered coffee, the smoke, the lights, the traffic, all were ordered in a new or different way. And as though the movie had retooled the part of you that presents the world as whole and stitched as yours. Stephen went to his cardboard job in his particle board office and shuffled through the pulp of ones and zeros, polygons, UI refinements, mod toolkits, optimization reports devoid of static cling, desire, need. And yet, for having no desire, he saw clearly into the processes and products, seeing into the fabric of what they could do and be, and so offhandedly set into motion the actions that would substantiate these coulds, opening the operating system he's working on to the Internet Erotica database he had been wary of doing business with on... So what he does is he uploads this algorithm to trace the outlines of human desires and then to modulate the database like it were a protein fluid poured not into the form of desire, but desires forming, hammered out into keyboards and the duration of the soundlight ported into the millions chambers, tracing through those windows the pathways of abstracted human lust, and giving her those voices yet without the taint somehow. She, being the algorithm, was innocent. He saw then, seeing into what she could be, the mirror of mankind. His desire made a single, infinitely faceted dame, his fingers caressing at her code as the office about him sprung to action in preparation for the update to the game he had been keeping to himself. I feel like there's too much to walk through to really dive into that stuff. I feel like I skipped a beat. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That was about erotica. And what happens is that this guy, he loses his connection with reality, and the only thing left is porn for him. Basically, the only thing that ties him to his body, because he hates his body, because it subjects him to time, and he figures out that there's this loop that he can do with his brain and his body to escape time. And he uses pornography to kind of like transcend the body and just become nothing. So I'm sorry, I should have prepared you for that. This is like the darkest, like grimiest book in the entire series. That's why I kind of like keep it over there in the corner. Probably shouldn't have brought it out tonight. It's not a happy-go-lucky thing. It's about the undeath of the author. Anyway, so I just wanted to check in with you guys, see how we're doing. I have nothing on my plate coming up. I guess we'll find something else to do. I have a couple of interviews that I'm angling for, but I have a lot of open free time. I think I have to kind of go back to work this month. I kind of work locally, and it's kind of the season, so kind of waiting for a call to see what I'm supposed to be doing in order to make that side of my living. But, you know, I've been spending too much time on the internet looking at the news, like really like trying to dive into the news and figure out, make sense of it. And there's a lot of instances of violence that very quickly shatter out of control. And there's a lot of vested interest in controlling the narrative right now, and it's just going to amp up. It's really going to amp up. And I think that all of us need to make sure to keep at least one foot out of the conversation, like out of the politics. You know, the political is personal, but if you take the political too personally, you have no personality left. It will completely consume you, right? So the difficulty with me as a content producer is that it takes time to actually build things of quality, you know? So you're kind of committed to the course that you take. And my course is kind of political right now. But I do like just want to put it out there that make sure if you are heavily on your line, if you are very vested into politics, make sure that you foster other aspects of life. Politics is going to be very intense for the next couple months, probably until January. Who knows what's going to happen with the voting and stuff. So, and, you know, of course, if the current president maintains the president, then the temperature is not going to be let down at all anymore. So it's just important for everybody's health, like personally your health, but also the health of the body politic, to not be in a state of frenzy all the time. And a lot of things that are happening spiral out of control because we attend to them too much. When we see a shooting, right? Doesn't matter who. When we see an act of violence, and all of us feast on that violence, we repeat that act of violence in our viewing, right? And then we repeat it in our telling of it. It quickly becomes something that's no longer localized to that incident. It becomes a morality play where all these vested things that weren't actually in the actual event come and bear down upon it. And that has the tendency to cause us to think that we are in a state of violence, or that we're on the verge of civil war, right? I see a lot of people, some of whom I respect, keep on like pointing out like this whole civil war thing. I don't think that is necessarily the case. I think that acts of violence, things have been worse before. If you actually go back and you look at the 60s and the 70s, there was one year in 70s where there was bombs going off constantly. Things were just blowing up constantly. There were a lot of radicals afoot. Things eventually kind of like wound down. The country didn't collapse upon itself. I know that the stakes can be seen as high. I'm not advocating for apathy. You know, I'm a Gen Xer. I've done the apathy thing, right? I think that there's a healthy amount of disconnection and just kind of insulating the events of violence, insulating these crazy stories, insulating that culture war, you know, and preserving your sanity in order to preserve the world from becoming a battleground, everything becoming a battleground. And what I bitch and moan about critical race theory and intersectionality is that they turn everything into a war. The same can happen just generally with that whole political discourse. So, you know, I've been meditating on it and like like looking at it and trying to come to a reasonable position. I know I'm pretty centrist. I just took one of those tests. I took like the 250 question test about where I am on the political compass, and I'm neutral all the way down. I'm neutral all the way down. I'm not left, I'm not right. Like, I see the importance of both of them, of having a dialogue between freedom and necessity and law and order and, you know, progress and tradition. Like, I see the tension, and I want to foster the tension between all those different things. And yet, I know that my position will be seen as radical by those who disagree with me, especially from the left. The left is in a very agitated state. Liberals and progressive, broadly construed, are in a very agitated state. So if you disagree with them, you're basically all right to them, right? And that is because certain movements within the party have captured not just, you know, the narrative, but the discourse. The way of framing things itself has kind of entered into this very tense, very urgent, very, you know, not having room to look at more than one side of things, or not take, you know, the fascist dissolution of America as the most serious thing ever, which I don't see it. I mean, I see parallels between the bravado of Mussolini, and Trump. Like I could see how somebody would see in Trump an authoritarian leader. I see that. I see what they see. I don't see him as that. I see a bunch of other things, you know, and even admitting that he's not like the most evil thing in the world feels like a violation of my neutrality thing. It's like, okay, now I'm going to get dogpiled, or now I'm going to tick off people who do see him as a very corrupt individual. I'm not even excusing his corruption, but I think that there's a lot of different mechanics about his presidency that I probably shouldn't say out loud. But I see him as being very useful in what I want to occur, which unfortunately involves people being so upset that they finally wake up to how idiotic they're being. By which I mean this ultra progressive, this ultra politically correct, authoritarian, change the world utopian mindset is very prevalent, and it needs to be put down, because that is the most corrosive, destructive thing in modern history, is all that stuff. It's all that stuff. That stuff is laid waste to countless lives. And it's on the rise because people are, for whatever reason, there's disparity. People are caught up in it. They don't see the end of it. That communist kind of stuff. I see it. I'm worried about that. And I can see how Trump escalates the agitation of the people. And I can see potentially that that's the better path. I'm trying to be apolitical, but still try to, you know, kind of expose my views, trying to work through that stuff. I'm really trying to work through that. It's exhausting. I don't mean to be one of those people like, oh, I'm so exhausted. I hate that. I'm so exhausted. But I do have to kind of like pull myself out of it, because it can completely consume you. Jeez. Man alive. Anyhow, I'm going to wrap up here probably like 5 or 10 minutes. Let's go into the downward arc. So I can start up the grill. We have a chicken tonight. I brined it in water with a quarter cup of salt, quarter cup of sugar, a few garlic cloves, some red spicy chili flakes, and then a special lady friend like threw like a handful of this brown stuff that she called spice into it. So I don't know what that stuff is. But I brined that for about 7 hours, and I took it out, and it's been chilling in the fridge, because if you chill it outside of the brine, it dries off the skin, and then you get a nice crispy skin. So what I do need to do first thing after I leave this is soak my wood chips. Got to soak those wood chips. I always forget to do that. And then I have dry wood chips, and that can be pretty accurate. You got to be careful with the dry wood chips. So I'm going to soak the wood chips. I'm going to prep up the grill. We're going to grill the chicken. And then I have to figure out what to do. I think I'm going to do some green beans in a foil pouch with butter and garlic, and some salt. That's classic. And they're juicy green beans. There's a lot of bounty in this world. And food is a very bountiful thing in this part of the world. We have farmers markets, which is like fresh produce. Very grateful for that stuff. I'm going to scroll through chat really quick and see if there's any questions. Graham Godfrey says, tuned off Brett and Eric while they trash talk Trump. If they spent the same time pointing out the good stuff Trump does, there would be better things ahead. Oh, God, I wish the discourse wasn't fraught. You know what? Trump doesn't make it easy. He does not make it easy, man. Can I say that at least? He does not make this shit easy, okay? He doesn't make it easy, but okay, I just want to say that. In my defense, it's not easy. But at the same time, I do understand what you're saying. Like, I think it's really easy to bag on him. And that's why I don't bag on him so much. Like, it's just like, it's kind of passe. It's like, it's what you're supposed to do. You know, when you have Trevor Noah and John Oliver going after him 24/7 and Stephen Colbert, you know, like all those naughties, comedians who were like cutting edge back in the day, when they're all going after the same guy and proposing the same story, it's like, why would I go down that direction? Like, I'm not going to follow those guys. So of course, like, I don't like, there's plenty of dumping on Trump, right? But it's really, it is a lot of work to try to like, to present him beyond he's got this magic touch. He's got this kind of this fog of war that he's doing. He's doing some amazing stuff to keep his enemies off balance. He's always keeping his enemies off balance, right? Which destabilizes everything, which I don't think is good, right? I don't think that the stability is good. And watching the Biden press conferences is really interesting. I've been watching the Biden stuff, and it's like everybody's about to fall asleep, right? Biden has like absolutely no energy. He can barely form sentences, right? It's obvious there's something really off with this guy's brain, right? And it, like, when I actually was sit down and watch 40 minutes of him trying to talk, it's like, it feels like it's elder abuse. It really does. Like, sincerely, I know I've heard that from somewhere else, but like, I feel bad for the guy. I'm like, why are you in this position? Like, what did they promise you to put you here, right? But at the same time, like, the obvious critique is that he's got a really hard time, like, making sense. It doesn't seem like he's all, like, cognitively there. And plus he's really low energy, and everybody's kind of hushed when they're talking, right? And he's really slow and nodding. And I think that actually that is probably kind of attractive. I think that that is actually an effective strategy against Trump, is to actually, like, you know, we're gonna go back to sleep, right? In a way, like, things are just gonna be calm and chill, right? Like, all the violence is gonna go away, and it's not gonna be a war anymore. It's not gonna be exhausting anymore, right? We're just gonna, like, go through and make these decisions and allow bureaucracy to creep through our government and strangle the life out of everyday Americans. I'm kidding. But still, like, I can see, like, there's a positive kind of attraction to Biden as kind of nothing. Right? It's kind of like the anti-Trump, in the sense of, like, somebody who's kind of just checked out, right? It's like, okay, well, now the government's just going to kind of take care of itself, and all of the deep state stuff's going to pick up where it left off, and all that Title IX stuff's going to come back down, and all the education stuff's going to come back in. I mean, I'm sorry, I have big problems with the legislative agenda of the Democrats. I have a very big problem with the legislative agenda of the Democrats, because it's infected with this stuff that I pinpoint. But I also know the radioactivity, the instability of Trump. And I know that there's certain aspects of that that are not good. Like, he's using his position of authority to constantly destabilize things. It's not really good for the mental health of the nation. I think it has exacerbated the differences between people. But at the same time, it's not just his fault. The media is absolutely insane. Like, the media has been absolutely insane, like, unconscionable. Like, the malpractice, the open propaganda and manipulation of the mainstream media is off the charts. It's off the charts. And if anybody can defeat that stuff and make them look like fools, that makes him a very attractive candidate to me. The enemy of my enemies is kind of my friend in this situation. That's where I'm kind of coming down. I invite discussion and disagreement on that. I know that having a political position kind of decreases my ability to be receptive to other people, because it kind of pegs me down. But I'm just trying to vocalize the stuff that I see and respond in kind to the ideas of others. So I do welcome more education in that arena. One more thing. I'm going to head out. What was I just thinking? I just had one idea. Oh, okay. One thing. The Republican convention. I watched the Democratic convention and I was really irked the whole time. I really felt like I was being manipulated the whole time. It was very obvious that I was being manipulated the whole time. It was very obvious to me. Like I'm talking aesthetically, right? Just aesthetically. The Republican convention, there was room for me to breathe because there was people who did have an agenda, but there was a lot of people just telling their stories. And what I saw 2 years ago, in 2018 it was, well, I stumbled upon this walk away campaign, and I did 2 little pieces on it, and not even talking about walking away from one political party, not even talking about the political substance of the movement, which is a divestment of individuals from the Democratic Party, like walking away from the Democratic Party. Without even commenting one way or another on that, the format, what I said in my first video about that, the format was absolutely novel. It was absolutely fresh. It was just people's testimonies. It was just people talking about their experience. Like really honestly saying, this is what happened to me, and this is why I'm making this decision. This is what happened to me, and this is why I'm making this decision. And, you know, there was some stupid criticism about it being a bot thing, you know, like people tried to deride it in the media as something fake when it was like the realest thing to happen. And I really think that the Republicans saw that. I think that the Republican strategy of the convention kind of just rebooted that walk away. Just the format of just normal people talking about their experiences to make their point, right? Of course, there's all this, you know, they're manipulating us, you know, but I could feel the manipulation was going in a lot of different directions rather than the Democratic manipulation was kind of, towards in kind of like a narrow kind of direction, and stuff that I've been steeped in being in, you know, Portland and Washington for 20 years now, and studying the stuff that I study. I'm really thoroughly understanding and very wary of the stuff that the Democrats are on board with. The Republican stuff was talking in a lot of different vectors of different values. There's stuff about, you know, dignity and about honor and about service and about loyalty. And like, it was really a positive message. I felt like there was more room for me in that narrative, whereas the Democrat had a lot of weight on it. There was a lot of fear. I don't want to diss Democrats or anybody who's a Democrat who has different views of that, but there was something weird about the Democrat stuff, which really speaks to why in 2016 they so desperately screwed up. And maybe it's the case that Bernie would have gotten trounced by Trump, and maybe it was the case that Hillary Clinton had paid her way in there and it was her turn and all that stuff. But the Democratic Party's really lost connection with the individual, and basically makes its ties by differentiating itself from the imminent threat of fascist devolution into, you know, some sort of race war, which they themselves facilitate. I don't know. I'm open to changing my mind, but that's just where I'm standing right now. And so if that's where I'm standing, this is what I have to look forward to and actually like make a case. If I do want to kind of make not a projection, what do they do when the newspaper, they say that we're going to support this candidate? There's a word, crap. Can't think of that word. If I'm going to do that, which I probably shouldn't, I probably should just not talk about electoral federal politics. People, first and foremost, the stuff that really matters, let me just say that, let's all get on board. The stuff that really matters in your life is the local stuff, your state government and your municipality. That stuff is really much more personal than the federal stuff. The federal stuff is the big show, right? But it's the minutia. It's the laws that are creeping in to your school district, to your business district, right? Those are the stuff that need to have people show up and participate in. That's the bigger story, right? That's the bigger responsibility as an adult we should be trained on. So that out of the way, that aside, if I want to like kind of forward a platform of saying why I want to make this decision or why I would like that outcome rather than this other outcome, you know, I should like try to make some salient arguments towards the people in the middle. right? Kind of let go of talking about the nutsos, right? And kind of make open pathways. Every once in a while in my videos or in my interviews, somebody will get on me for saying maybe, right? For detailing what I think of as a destructive ideology and saying maybe, saying like leaving room for error, kind of being humble, right? And part of that is because I don't know the whole story. I don't know the whole story, but the other part of that, the other part of being humble, as somebody with an opinion, somebody's speaking, if you can be humble, what you're basically doing is you're allowing like space for other people to be there. You're actually inviting people to the conversation, people who do look different, things differently than you. And just that invitation in and of itself allows you to move and them to move in a different direction. But if you're walling everybody off in this kind of chamber of certainty, nobody's going to be able to be moved by that. The only people that you're going to pick up are people who are going in your direction anyways. You're just going to facilitate an echo chamber. And if you get big in your echo chamber, it's going to be a fanarchy. Your fans are going to be dictating what you say because you've only ever catered to what you've already decided, right? So being humble, allowing that maybe, right, invites and gives traction to people who might not see things differently, might be changed, right? And then allow them to think through things themselves. So that's like just a plug for humility and a plug for doubt, I guess, for not being so certain. And even when the stakes are high, the bigger person can allow other people to have different points of view and to agree with things that you completely disagree with, right? Anyways, thanks for letting me ramble. You guys are wonderful. You're a sacred bunch of folk. I hope you guys to the vet, right? Not the mom, but the person who had the kittens took them to the vet, and the vet said that they might have like diseases. So the vet wanted $250 for blood work because they might have a genetic disease. So we were put in this really weird position of paying $250 for these cats that we never met that might be diseased, and then inheriting these cats that are diseased. When Bijou, she already has like sinus problems. She's not unhealthy, but she's not the most healthy cat, right? So if the disease is communicable, or whatever diseases are when they talk to each other and go into a different body, then we're going to disease our cat, and then we're going to have to create quarantine. So we just don't run a shelter. So we lost our kittens, or the kittens fell through. I was really, really looking forward to having a new little critter around and teaching it to go on walks and play catch and stuff like that. So sorry about that. Sorry for getting your hopes up, if your hopes were up, if you were paying attention to that little plot arc in the summer life of Benjamin Boyce, but that's how that wrapped up. So we're both a little sad, and I guess we'll find something. When we find our cat, we'll find our cat. We'll get a cat. So that was actually the only thing I had to say to you on this live stream. So I hope that all of the talk before that little anecdote was worth it to get there. Anything else? I don't think so. I don't think so. Yep, time to cook the chicken. So you guys have a good night. If I said something that you disagree with, I'm really looking forward to figuring out what I did so wrong in my belief system and my interpretation of things. Sit up, stand up, be cool, calm, collected. And, there's a heat wave coming through this part of the world. If you guys are suffering a heat wave, take care of yourselves mentally, physically, spiritually. Keep on a good path. Things will open up. They will. Good night.